Well, signing day is in the books, so let's talk about it a little bit. Maybe we'll talk a little hoops, too, depending on if we have time. We'll see how much time it takes to talk about the signing class, but always plenty to talk about, and we'll certainly get into a lot of it here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Thursday. Didn't really feel like spending much time on the cold open there. Just figured we'd jump right into the conversation and get talking about some Pitt stuff here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know the deal, what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have a ton of Pitt content on there right now. I mean, in addition to these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, we had a live show yesterday morning at 10 a.m. We went live, so that's on the YouTube channel as well. We talked for an hour about the signing class. We got interviews with, I think, 10 guys in the recruiting class so far. I don't know if all 10 are on the YouTube channel on live on there yet. I think 7 are live, and we've got 3 more that we'll publish today. And then we'll try and get more as we move through the week. That'll all be there at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our weekly live show that we didn't do last night because Pitt had a basketball game. We're going to do that tonight at 8 o'clock. Me and Jim Hammett will get together with you and talk a little Pitt sports, talk about the recruiting class and the basketball team and tons of other things, transfers, all that stuff. That's all right here tonight at 8 o'clock on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And we have press conferences and interviews and post-game, all kinds of stuff at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the best place to find Pitt video content. So go, I mean, you're already watching this video, right? Maybe you're listening to the podcast. If not, I mean, you should be watching the video anyway. But that's the best place to get the Pitt video content that we put out really every day. And, of course, the best place to get Pitt sports coverage every day is right there, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, people are talking about Pitt sports. Pitt fans are talking about Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. If you're a Pitt fan, it's the best online Pitt sports community, so you should go check it out. You might be saying to yourself, Chris, what is that sweet, sweet hat you are wearing? And that's right, I've got my Backshore hat on tonight, today, this morning, whenever it is that you're watching this video, because you know about Backshore. We've talked about Backshore before. Backshore apparel.com. Backshore company is a company owned by our good friend Mike. He's a huge Pitt fan, and that's number one. I mean, you should be drawn to this just based on that right off the bat. Number one, Mike is a huge Pitt fan. He started this company and just really started him in the last few months, and it's called Backshore. And the website is backshore.apparel.com. They sell the best way to call it, and Mike calls it, is beach tech, and it's hats and it's t-shirts and beach hoodies. You know, you might not be wearing t-shirts and beach hoodies at this time of year, but this hat is good for any time of year. It's going to be great at the beach this summer. It's going to be great to wear through the winter. It's going to be great to wear out on the golf course. It's with special tech that they designed and developed for these hats. It's buoyant, it's breathable, it's durable, it's quick dry, it's lightweight, it's wicking, and it looks really, really sweet. And this hat I'm wearing right now, you can see the excellent colors that Mike put on this thing. It's the Hail hat, and you can see why. Like I said, Mike's a huge Pitt fan. You see the colors that he picked for this hat. And what's, the best part right now is if you go to backshore.apparel.com, use the promo code HOLIDAY10. That's one word, HOLIDAY10, HOLIDAY10. You get 10% off. All right? So go check it out. Go look around. They don't have a ton of products there. It's very streamlined. You can see what they've got. And it's all really sweet, really well made. The hat fits so well. I love this hat. I can't wait to wear it at the beach or tomorrow. I'm going to wear it all year round because it's a great hat. It's comfortable. It fits well. And like I said, you can get this hat or any of the other cool designs and colors that they've got for 10% off with the promo code HOLIDAY10. So go check it out, backshoreapparel.com. Our good friend Mike, huge Pitt fan, has developed some really sweet gear. And it's not Pitt branded gear, but I mean, these colors, it's pretty. It's pretty. Backshoreapparel.com. Go check it out. HOLIDAY10 is the promo code to get 10% off. All right. Signing day recap. It was funny. I was thinking about this throughout the day yesterday, and after signing day, after the signing day press conference, and throughout the evening, and even during the basketball game, I was thinking about last night. Like, well, what are we going to talk about on the Thursday morning Pitt? I mean, there's the basketball game, obviously, to talk about. Pitt beat Purdue Fort Wayne despite making only 2 3-pointers in the game, and we could talk about that, and we probably will, like I say, depending on our time here. But I was like, well, it's the day after signing day. We should have some sort of signing day recap, right? And so I was thinking about it, and I'm like, we've talked a lot about all of this stuff, about recruiting and about transfers and about the class and where it stands. We talked a lot leading up to signing day, talked a lot yesterday on signing day, and here we are the day after, and it feels like we should recap, but I'm like, well, what new things do I have to say? What new things do I have to say that we didn't cover on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, multiple times on Wednesday between the Morning Pit and the live show in the mid-morning? What else do I have to say? And I think there's a few things. I mean, number one, we start with, if you roll the clock back to Tuesday, we talked about some of the biggest storylines entering signing day. And one of those storylines, I think maybe the first one I mentioned, let me look here. Well, the first thing I mentioned, I think, was transfers. And then the second storyline I mentioned heading into signing day was the question marks, of Francis Brew and Jeremiah Marcelin. 2 wayward souls who had been in the recruiting class for quite a bit, quite a long time. Brew since the spring, Marcelin since the summer. But they were up in the air about whether or not they were going to sign with Pitt yesterday or whether they were going to flip. Brew, a 4-star defensive tackle from Ohio in the Columbus area, took an official visit to Michigan State over the weekend. Jeremiah Marcelin, 3-star linebacker in Miami. Didn't take a recent official visit, but had in-home visits with Louisville and Maryland, and certainly was considering those schools. It seems like Maryland was the top competitor for his services. He had already taken an official visit to Maryland and Louisville over the summer, so he didn't have that option available to him in December, but he was very much looking around. They both were very much looking around, and it was very much up in the air about whether or not either or both of those guys would sign with Pitt. And I had made my prediction on Panther-Lair.com. I think on Monday I made my prediction, or maybe even Sunday night, that the way it was leaning at that point, the way it was going, it looked like they were going to lose Francis Brew and they were going to hold on to Jeremiah Marcelin. And I ended up being wrong about that. They got both guys. And I guess if I was going to be wrong in that prediction, that was the way to be wrong. It wasn't to be wrong that Marcelin also flipped. That was the way to be wrong about that prediction, that they just end up getting both altogether. We hope to catch up with Francis Brew and Jeremiah Marcelin at some point soon, so we can get a little bit more thoughts on their, or a little more insight on their thought process and kind of how they went through it and when they decided, when they made that final decision, what made that final decision. But that's all sort of the nuts and bolts of it. What it comes down to is Pitt did really well to hold on to both of those guys. Brew is part of a bigger picture here, and I talked about this a lot yesterday. He's part of a bigger picture in this offseason of reloading the defensive line room. You've got Brew and Jasir Whittington as 4-star defensive tackles in the recruiting class, and Nick James, a former 4-star recruit who's coming in as a transfer from Indiana, as another defensive tackle, where you're reloading there. And then a defensive end, you've got Sincere Edwards, who's a 4-star coming in the recruiting class. Zach Crothers, who's maybe one of the more underrated guys in the class after he had 22.5 tackles for loss and 13 sacks this past season. And Ty Uhas coming in from Central Catholic, who could play D end or D tackle. Plus, you've got David Ojebwe, another former 4-star defensive end, coming in as a transfer from Clemson, and Nate Matlack, a guy who's played each of the last 3 years, basically every single game at Kansas State, coming in with 1 year of eligibility to play. So a lot of veteran experience there. And it's like 8 guys that they're bringing in between transfers and high school to really reload that room. And they need it. They need it. I mean, they've lost a lot of defensive linemen over the last 2 years. When you look at transfers, I mean, just this year with transfers, they lost the 4 defensive tackles. I mean, transfers and guys running out of eligibility, they lost 4 defensive tackles, 3 super seniors who were out of eligibility, and DeAndre Jules, who went into the transfer portal and I think committed to and then signed with South Carolina, I believe. And then a defensive end, they had Sam Okunlola go, a guy who was looking pretty promising was trying to see if there was another. I thought there wasn't. No, I guess Nate Temple went into the portal and then ended up coming back out of the portal and returning to Pitt. But that's a lot of attrition. I mean, just in this 1 year, they had 6 guys, 5 guys come off the roster. And then you follow that after last year when, Haba Baldonado and John Morgan and Deslin Alexander and Kalijah Cansey, 4 guys go off the roster there. So in 2 years, you lost 10 defensive linemen. And that's a lot to make up. When you were kind of not really recruiting those positions all that heavily in the previous couple of years. I mean, they had a lot of lean years recruiting, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But they had a number of lean years in recruiting, leading up to the last 2 seasons. And then they have all this attrition, and you don't really have the players available on the roster to backfill it. Well, they do now. Bringing in 10 defensive linemen between the recruits and the transfers, now you're building those numbers back up. The room might not have a ton of experience, although defensive end, I mean, Deion Hayes has played a lot, Bam Breema's played a lot, Nate Temple's played a lot. Beyond those guys, Nikai Johnson, we'll see where he ends up. He might end up moving to defensive tackle. It kind of looks like that move is in the works. And they would need it. I mean, he's got a little bit of experience, but they don't really have many experienced tackles at all. Elliot Donald has played a little bit. Sean Fitzsimmons has played a little bit. Isaiah Neal played 1 snap. So, a guy like Nick James, who doesn't have a ton of experience, but has a lot in comparison to that group, is going to come in and be one of the veteran players with, the most experience in the group. And so they don't have a ton of experience in that room overall, but they're bringing in a lot of bodies, a lot of guys with high pedigrees and seemingly high ceilings based on their recruiting rankings, either now as they're recruits or when they were recruits, if they're a transfer. And so that room has gotten rebuilt really in one offseason. It's pretty remarkable to watch. Marcelin, continues a similar trend, I think, at linebacker. And Panarduzzi, I asked Panarduzzi yesterday, if the last 2 classes of linebackers, with last year with Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, and Braylon Lovelace, and then this year with Jeremiah Marcelin, Cameron Lindsay, and Davin Bruton, I asked him if he felt like, these 2 classes back to back really kind of rebuilt the linebacker room. And he bristled at that. He took umbrage with the suggestion that they were rebuilding the linebacker room. And I'm like, I don't know what else you would call it. You return 3 guys. Aiden Henningham went into the portal, and, Bengali Kamara went into the portal, and Shane Simon graduated, so, he's out of eligibility. You returned Solomon DeShields and Kyle Lewis, and Brandon George went into the portal, and then he came back. So you return 3 guys at linebacker outside of last year's recruiting class and this year's recruiting class. So you needed to rebuild that room, and that's not a knock on anything or anyone. I mean, you needed to rebuild the room, and I think they have, and it's actually a credit to them and their recruiting approach that they've recruiting success that they've been able to get these 6 linebackers over the course of the 2 classes. I think Cameron Lindsay is probably the best linebacker in the class this year, but it was still important to hold on to Jeremiah Marcelin because I think he's going to be really good in college. You hope that some of his mercurial nature doesn't, trickle over to his play or how he works or focuses once he gets to Pitt, but he's a really talented prospect at a team that had a whole lot of success this past season, and he was a big part of it. Put up crazy numbers with playing half a game most of the time. And so I think he's a big piece to add to this puzzle, along with those other guys with Lindsay and Bruton. So, those are probably the 2 things that, in addition to sort of restocking the offensive line, kind of following up on that as well. We talked about the line really being reloaded on both sides of the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball, the offensive line and defensive line reloading. I kind of felt like that was some of the biggest. Those were the biggest storylines. Linebacker, D-line, O-line, largely because it made up so much of their recruiting class. I mean, it was 13 out of 19 guys were linemen or linebackers. So you went heavy on those positions, and I think you reloaded some spots that needed to be reloaded. That was kind of my biggest takeaway from signing day, but obviously there'll be a lot to talk about, and we'll talk about it tomorrow and going forward, particularly as they add more transfers, and I think they will add more transfers. That's the last thing I would say. I made this point yesterday on the live stream. I would make that point again today, and I probably talked about it on the Morning Pitt yesterday, that this is not the finish line. Yesterday was not the finish line. Signing day was not the end of this offseason or this recruiting cycle or this transfer cycle. They'll probably get, I don't know, they may or may not get more high school recruits in January or February, but I think they will get more transfers. And remember, transfers just have to be in the portal by January 2nd. They can come out of the portal at any time they want, but they have to be in the portal by January 2nd. They have to inform their team that they're leaving and put in their paperwork with their team by January 2nd. And so you've still got a couple weeks here before those guys, before you hit that point where it's like, well, whoever's in is whoever is all the guys that are going to be in. Right now, it's the door is still open. The portal is still open for players to enter it. And so I think there's still possibilities out there for Pitt of guys to land. Basketball game last night. I do want to talk about it a little bit. Pitt beats Purdue Fort Wayne, a game that I think a lot of people were sort of cautious about or concerned even a little bit about. Purdue Fort Wayne, the top 75 team. They came into the game like 11-1. They were averaging 87 points per game, and looked like a really good team. Didn't turn the ball over a lot, and looked like they could be a real challenge for Pitt. Well, part of the problem was they didn't have a lot of size, and so. Well, that was part of the problem. A big part, maybe even a bigger part of the problem, was that they didn't shoot well at all. Purdue Fort Wayne shot 5 of 26 from 3, and that, I think, helped offset the fact that Pitt only shot 2 of 20 from 3. These are two teams that combined average more than 20 made three-pointers per game. All right. And last night, they made 7. It was not a good shooting night at the Peterson Event Center. And I think there were a few factors that went into Pitt's victory. They played very good defense against Purdue Fort Wayne, but I think they also took advantage of the size differential. They're much bigger. Purdue Fort Wayne just wasn't a very big team. I think their tallest guys were like maybe 6'8". And so Pitt had a night where they shot 2 of 20 from 3. They were generally kind of careless with the ball. They turned it over 13 times. But because of their size advantage, they were able to out-rebound Purdue Fort Wayne 54-33. If you're plus 21 on the boards, you're probably going to be in a pretty good situation, even though Pitt, they had 18 offensive rebounds and only got 11 second chance points. But they were able to use the size to win the battle on the boards, and they were also able to use the size to convert baskets down low. They ended up with 38 points in the paint. I think in the first half, Zach Austin made a three-pointer with like a minute to go in the first half. Other than that, and what they score in the first half, they scored 31 in the first half. So Zach Austin made a three-pointer. All of Pitt's other points in the first half, the other 28 points they scored, were either in the paint or at the free throw line. I mean, it was really all or nothing. And anytime they attempted anything approaching a jump shot outside the lane, nothing. Clang. Other than Zach Austin making a 3. But they were able to get away with that. And they're not going to be able to get away with that on most nights against quality teams that have comparable size that can give them a battle on the boards and take advantage of all those missed threes. But because of Pitt's size advantage against Purdue and Purdue Fort Wayne, and how hard they played defense. I mean, they did play really well on defense. They defended well. I don't want to take anything away from it. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's no big deal. I mean, they basically were able to sleepwalk through that win, because that wasn't the case. I mean, I think they worked really hard on defense. They gave up easy baskets in transition when their offense was sloppy and careless and committed a turnover. Purdue Fort Wayne ended up with 10 points off of turnovers, so not a ton of capitalizing there. But if Purdue Fort Wayne also shoots anywhere close to their, if they're a little bit closer to their season averages, well, this game's a little bit more interesting. If they, like I say, they average 9 or 10 3-pointers per game. If they make 10, that's another 15 points, and you add 15 to a 62-48 game, it's now 63-62. If Purdue Fort Wayne is anywhere close. Now, of course, you could play that same game with Pitt. If they're anywhere close to their season averages and they make 9 or 10 threes in this game, that's another 20-some points, and they're in the 80s. So it's not if we're going to play that game with Purdue Fort Wayne, we can play it with Pitt as well. My point is this. Pitt can't have too many nights like this where they shoot the way they did last night. And I don't think they will. I think they'll generally shoot better than that. I think they'll generally play better offense than that. But it really kind of hammered the point home that you're not going to be able to cover up for those shooting woes or the sloppy play or the turnovers once you get into ACC play, which, of course, starts now. Jeff Capel stayed with the lineup that he used against South Carolina State. He had Will Jefferson, Guillermo Diaz-Graham in the starting lineup. But Zach Austin really kind of stole the show a little bit. Will Jefferson played only 4 minutes in the second half. Zach Austin played 13 and finished the game. I had Austin's stats right here. Finished the game with 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. And generally had a really good game and showed some explosiveness. He had a block and a steal. He can be a spark for this team. And I think that's what they need him to be, and that's what they're counting on him to be. That's what they were hoping he would be. Remember we talked about him being a taller Nike Sabandy. He was supposed to be a spark Sabandy. Well, Nike Sabandy did his best work coming off the bench. Maybe that's the role for Zach Austin. And if he's on that night, he can get, what did he, I say 14 minutes in the second half. He played 21 minutes in the game. He can give you 20 minutes, 25 minutes if he's on that night, like Nike Sabandy would sometimes be on, like Austin has been in these last 2 games since he moved to the bench. He can provide you with that spark off the bench. And if he's on, he can stay out there and he can get extended minutes. And if he's not, then you can go back to Jefferson or Jorge Diaz-Graham or however you want to, whatever kind of personnel you want to use out there, 3 guards even. But I think it's a good role for him. And Guillermo Diaz-Graham, also in the starting lineup for the second game in a row, replacing Federico. Federico played really well last night. He had a game-high 13 points. He also grabbed 8 rebounds. He had 3 assists. He had 3 blocks. He had 2 steals. He only turned the ball over 1 time. He only committed 2 fouls in 30 minutes. And again, huge size advantage for Guillermo. And so that helped with the scoring for sure, because he had a lot of baskets. He hit a lot of buckets right under the basket, and it helped on the rebounds as well. But I think it's a good confidence boost, and these 2 games have been a good confidence boost for Guillermo heading into ACC play, where he's going to be needed to play a lot. And so that I think both of those moves are encouraging. If I'm Jeff Capel, I probably would stick with both of those moves and keep Will Jefferson, Guillermo Diaz-Graham in the starting lineup, and bring Zach Austin off the bench and see how that kind of works. Roll with it for a little bit against starting with Syracuse on the 30th. Pitt's got a long break here, 9 days off until their next game, which is the start of the full bore conference schedule. And we'll see how it goes. It's hard to feel a lot of confidence or optimism about the team after the game they had last night, but they played pretty poorly and still won by 14. So can't get down on them too much. And if they play defense like that, they're going to keep themselves in games and give themselves a chance to win games, a lot of games. But they're obviously going to have to score those baskets. They got to make shots. You can't have Blake Hinson going 2 of 10, scoring 5 points in the game. It's not going to work. Not going to work. All right. Don't forget, tonight, 8 p.m., we'll have the Panther-Lair live show, the weekly live stream. We moved it from Wednesday to Thursday this week, so make sure you tune in for that. Jim and I would be glad to have you join us with your comments and questions and join the conversation. And then we'll be back with the final Morning Pit of the week tomorrow. I'm not sure what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to have a Morning Pit on Christmas Day, but still figuring that out. Well, I'll tell you before next week what's going on. But either way, thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for watching everything so far. Make sure you check out all the recruit interviews that we did. I think these guys are some really interesting guys, good young men, and fun to talk to. I think you'll enjoy those conversations. So go check them out right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget Backshore apparel. You've got to check out these hats. These hats are so nice. I love this hat. It's so comfortable. It's breathable. It's dry fit. And you can get it for 10% off. Use the promo code HOLIDAY10. Backshoreapparel.com is the website. HOLIDAY10 is the promo code. Thanks for watching it today. We appreciate it. Like this video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Enjoy your Thursday. It's almost the end of the week. It's almost the holiday. I hope you have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.